A decade of protests from environmental groups has come to naught. That's after India's Adani Enterprises secured Australia's approval for the development of what will become one of the world's largest coal mines.
Today, the regulator has informed Adani that following many years of work, the groundwater-dependent ecosystem management plan has met the environmental conditions required by its environmental authority and has been approved.
Queensland's green light was the final hurdle in the construction of the project, which Adani acquired in 2010. The company is expected to spend close to $1.4 billion on the site. It plans to extract and export close to 8 billion tons from Queensland's inland Galilee Basin. Global demand for coal is expected to continue rising until 2023. India will account for much of that growth. Adani says the mine will also support more than 8,000 jobs in the state, and construction could begin within days.
So the construction period for the mine is essentially mine and rail project is essentially 2 years. So ostensibly you can be thinking from today in 2 years' time, people should be expecting that we've exported our first piece of coal.
But activists warn all the digging could further threaten the fragile ecosystem of the Great Barrier Reef, about 400 kilometers away. Thermal coal is one of the biggest sources of carbon emissions linked to rising global temperatures. Authorities say they plan to take measures to make sure the environment is protected, though how is still unclear.
Unfortunately, to date, Adani has not always engaged with the department in the same constructive way that other major resources companies have done. I hope that this is not an indication of how the company will approach their future obligations. As with all projects, the regulator will focus strongly on compliance with the approved plan, and the company has an obligation to Queenslanders to ensure it acts in accordance with its approvals.
The Queensland Resources Council, which represents mining firms in the state, says the Adani project's approval could pave the way for up to 6 more coal mines in the area. Though they've lost one battle, activists say they plan to fight those projects just as hard. Paolo Montecillo, TRT World.
Well, let's dig a little deeper into this story now with Simon Cullen in London. He's an Australian journalist and former political correspondent for the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, who's been following developments on the proposed Adani coal mine. Hi Simon, welcome to Money Talks. Now, the coal mine, as we know, has been somewhat of a political hot potato for several years now. Tell us more about why this project has been so controversial.
Well, largely the biggest reason this has been controversial is the environmental concerns. It is a significant new mine at a time when many countries are phasing out their reliance on coal for electricity generation. And there's also a concern over how this coal mine could affect the Great Barrier Reef, not only from the ultimate burning of the coal, but also the transportation of the coal from central Queensland through the coast of Queensland. Those ships, of course, would have to travel through those marine waters around the Great Barrier Reef. There's a concern too about how the piles of coal at that port could leach chemicals or contaminated water into those marine waters if there's an event of heavy rain. But proponents of this mine argue that it's about jobs and that those environmental concerns can be managed, and this is about jobs for parts of Queensland where there's relatively high unemployment. So essentially, this debate has been a debate about the environment versus jobs, and intertwined with all of that, of course, is politics. And just 1 month ago, when there was a federal election in Australia, this issue was a key factor in Queensland. The centre-left Labor Party did not offer significant support for this mine and lost a lot of support. So it lost seats in this state, and Adani was seen as one of the key factors at play in that election.
Yes, and I want to talk more about the promised economic benefits in a moment, but remind us of what some of the hurdles were that Adani, an Indian conglomerate, has had to face over the years in order to get to this point where it's finally been given the approval to go ahead.
Yeah, there's been a number of significant environmental checks from the Australian government's point of view and also from the Queensland state government's point of view. Both levels of government have quite strict environmental laws. Both those levels of government have been carrying out multiple checks, things like the impact on endangered species, of birds. The latest one, as the report just suggested, was about the groundwater supplies. So environmental hurdles have been a significant one. There's also been an argument about the economics of this project, and there has been some concern as to whether Adani can actually fund this significant coal mine. And there has been pressure put on, certainly in Australia, on Australian banks not to provide funding for this mine. So over the decade or so that this mine proposal has been active, Adani has actually scaled back its initial proposal, which obviously requires less money. It says that if it has to, it can fund it itself. So there's been some significant environmental checks and some significant economic hurdles. And then, of course, there is public opinion, and that is where there has been quite a strong divide in Australia, particularly in the state of Queensland. And essentially that comes down to a public relations campaign. And that is where those jobs versus the environment debates were so critical.
Interesting. Now, there's been a bit of conjecture about the economic benefits of this Adani mine, hasn't there, especially around the number of jobs that this project will create?
Absolutely, and this has been a key part of the debate. Adani put out a statement just today saying that this mine would create 1,500 direct jobs and 6,750 indirect jobs. Now, that's during the ramp-up and construction phase, to use their words. There's no part of this statement which talks about the ongoing employment. Now, a senior government senator last year said the number could be as low as 100 jobs. She later backtracked from that comment and said, oh no, Adani has updated the project. Adani itself, though, has not given a specific number. It says mines of a similar size in Queensland can operate from about 800 jobs to about 1,500 ongoing jobs. So even it itself has not said how many ongoing jobs it would have or create. And this is obviously a far cry from the initial tens of thousands of jobs that this project initially promised. That was when it was first proposed. Obviously, that was a bigger project. It's been scaled back, but the question still remains, how many jobs ongoing will be created in Queensland from this mine? Certainly, the number is not as significant as its early proponents were claiming.
And now that the project has finally got the green light, how soon does the company say it'll be up and running?
So it says that it can begin mining within a couple of years. 2 years is what the company has said. There is still, though, a further federal government hurdle to extract the mine. So today's approval is certainly about the construction of the mine. That can begin. There's some further checks before the extraction phase can start taking place. And this approval today also only applies to open cut mining. There's still further checks and further tests to be carried out before it can do underground mining. So it's not the final end game for this project. There are still some further hurdles to come, and still, some significant challenges to overcome as well.
Okay, we'll see how it all unfolds. Simon Cullen in London, thank you again for your time.